We're back with Game of Thrones Overrated this week, and Simon's away, so we brought in Finn,
Hi there.
who you might remember from XCOM You're Not Helping. If not, go and check that out now.
I'm Commander.
So, we're on to Cripples, Bastards and Broken Things.
By
this
far
week.
my favourite title of any Game of Thrones episode. I love the title of this episode. It's just so nice.
I wish I liked it as much as you liked the title.
Okay.
So, this episode, I feel like, was a backward step for Game of Thrones, because the previous episode, we got exposition, we've got heavily motivated exposition, where people were telling each other things for reasons. This episode, very much less so. And I would say the one clear defining moment of that was the scene between Viserys and Doria, the whole...
That scene. The exposition in the bath.
Yeah.
I'm going to be honest, I don't think that's the best example of exposition in the show either. It's a very strange character for him to be telling that stuff to in the first place. I think the only thing I can really defend it by saying is that... No, sorry, I'm out.
Because it attempts to give Viserys backstory that's going to be made irrelevant by his imminent death.
Well, yeah, but they do need to make that death earned. I mean, I know he dies suddenly and out of the blue, but that's kind of setting up how people die in the Game of Thrones universe.
It gives Doria a motivation which she can't act on?
Yeah, no, that is also true. I don't know. It might come up way, way later, maybe.
No, it doesn't, because she gets killed.
Oh yeah, good point.
No, she doesn't get killed. She gets locked in a dungeon.
Yeah, I'm not a huge fan of that exposition. I don't mind what they're saying. Could have think of a couple better places where it could have been put. But I don't think across the entire episode all the exposition is laboured that kind of way.
I don't know. I mean, the scene with Jory and Jamie outside Robert's sexcapade.
Oh, I quite like that one.
I mean, the information is quite interesting, but why are they having the conversation?
I thought they were having the conversation so Jamie could distract himself from what Robert was doing.
Well, no, because the first thing that happens when he comes into the scene is he goes, shh.
Yeah, but that's Jamie just being a cynical weirdo. It's part of his character. That's how Jamie behaves. He inflicts what he has to go through on other people. He does it quite a lot.
Yeah.
I mean, whether it's Bria later on in the series when he's making her see how he sees the world, whether it's him talking to that squire who he later kills, or whether it's right at the beginning, even him attempting to kill Bran is a bit like that. Him inflicting his worldview on other people and forcing people to see the world the way he does is quite a big thing for who Jaime Lannister is. To me, that just made sense for what he would do. Also, there's quite a few examples of extremely good exposition, like setting up what the Greyjoys are, just by Tyrion going to Theon, yeah, your dad is terrible, and you're a captive. Works quite well. Because they don't go into a list of, like, Greyjoy family history or anything. They just kind of mention a couple of things, so when they appear as bigger things later on, you've already established the kind of way they behave. The setting up of the murder mystery plot.
Well, actually, I was going to bring up something with the Greyjoy plot first.
Okay.
I think that scene with Tyrion and Theon worked because Peter Dinklage is a great actor. Not per se because it was well written.
Well, yeah. I mean, I'm not going to deny that Peter Dinklage's acting ability in almost every single scene Tyrion is ever in is a huge part of it. However, Alfie Allen is nowhere near as good as Peter Dinklage. He's not even close, and he still carries that scene off relatively well. It's not the best written thing that has ever happened, because exposition very rarely is, but it's well written enough for me not to sit there being like, stop talking.
I suppose my question is, do we really need to know this much about the guys with boats?
Yeah, I think you need to know that much about the guys with boats. The guys with boats become quite important for a bit.
Have they?
Well,
really?
Yeah, they're an earlier piece of a series of motivations that affects a lot of people further down the line. They're not necessarily, the central focus of the entire thing. But if you take that puzzle piece out, a lot of the things anyone is doing makes no sense. Like, especially when Theon is Reek. All of his behaviour would be really weird if you didn't know enough about the guys with boats.
I just feel like that we come back to this material when the Greyjoys are properly introduced in Season 2, so I don't know if...
They do come back to it, but because you've got that bit of background there about what they are, they don't have to do a heavy exposition dump when they're properly introduced. Properly introduce them going, these are the guys with boats, Iron Price, something about drowned gods. Can't remember how the rest of that works.
I suppose that was just my issue, though, is just that a large amount of this episode is just a huge information dump.
Well, it's still early doors, there's a lot of information that needs dumped. Some of it's handled
for
better
me,
than others.
the Greyjoys at the start, you don't need that. like it's more confusing than anything else to give you that information when you don't per se need it to understand the plot.
I don't know, I'm going to be honest with you. If they hadn't had that, I might have assumed Theon was a Stark.
Okay.
I think it needed to be covered, especially like with his relationship with Robb Stark. I think that needed to be there to cover that. Also, his slightly odd relationship with Jon Snow.
Yeah.
It needs to be there to explain that, because they're both outsiders in the family. Also, his relationship with Bran, which is relatively important in this.
Because I'll tell you something that actually confused me on first viewing, was the war they talk about in this episode often gets confused for the war that came about as part of the rebellion. But it's not. It's the war that came about because of the rebellion of the Greyjoys. And the problem is, because you're both referring to both of them as rebellions, I understand why I got confused. Was there enough delineation between those two different wars for it to be clear that, like, the war that Jory and Jaime are talking about later is the war with the Greyjoys. And the war that Tyrion and Theon are talking about is the war with the Greyjoys. The thing is, the entire previous episode talking about the war between Robert and the Targaryens, is there enough delineation to get that there are two different wars? Because I get it now, with loads more context information, but I didn't get it on first viewing.
I didn't either, to be honest with you. I think they should call the Greyjoy one a War of Secession or something.
Yeah, like, it would have just helped if it had a different word, because both are referred to as rebellions, one word, and then it's easy to just confuse the two.
Well, the Greyjoy War of Secession, that doesn't use any extra words. They could have just called it that. I agree with you on that point. There's one other scene of particularly good exposition I'd like to bring up. And that's between Littlefinger and Sansa at the...
Yes, I was going to bring that up. And again, I would say that's not per se the greatest writing, but Aidan Gillen makes that entire speech.
Okay, fair enough.
Because the manner of which he tells that story, because he is just telling a character about two other characters. That is not the best writing. But the way he tells it really brings you into it.
That's true.
Because it's clear that he's relishing giving these details. So it's clear, you're getting a clear sense of his opinion about the story.
Yeah. I don't know, that's actually why I liked it. It gave him an option to show off. Yeah, fair enough, it's not the best written thing ever, but it was enjoyable to watch.
Because he's also kind of creepily hitting on Sansa during that scene as well.
Yeah, that is weird.
Well, that's going to be a running theme.
Well, yeah, no, his entire relationship with, all of the women of that family line is a big part of his character.
Yeah.
It kind of needed to happen quite early on that he weirdly hit on one of the younger ones.
Yeah.
You've already had the scene between him and Caitlin Tully to justify that as well, so it's not like suddenly out of the blue.
It's also just the way that he says when he sits down next to Sansa, it's like, oh, I've got a long history with your family. Like, oh, Littlefinger. And then Arya's just like, why are you Littlefinger? I liked that as well.
Oh yeah, I liked that.
Because that felt like just such a genuine moment.
I think it's probably the first scene in the entire thing of Arya's that I particularly liked, is that bit.
Because I feel like Arya gets put out on an island by herself too much. Because her doing all her training stuff just separates her from the rest of the context that makes her character interesting. I'm
going to be honest, I know this is more your side of point, but I would have preferred Arya to start training after Ned's death, not before.
Yeah.
If she was just kicking about doing tomboy stuff, that would be fine. But it doesn't necessarily have to be trying to be a ninja yet.
I'd also like it more if Ned put up more of a case for not being a swordsman. Because there are very legitimate points he could make.
Yeah, no, certainly. The fact that he's dangerous.
Yeah.
But I don't know. I don't think he wants her not to be. I always took it as him being actually quite a concerned and relatively kind father and not really wanting her to have to marry into the nobility and just pump out a bunch of kids.
Yeah.
So I don't mind him not putting a huge case up for it, because I always kind of interpret that as Ned kind of wanting her to be a swordsman a bit himself.
But I suppose all these things that I was bringing up with exposition earlier, it gets me onto a point that I've wondered about Game of Thrones, particularly having watched these earlier episodes again. Would Game of Thrones work better if they use flashback?
Huh.
I think it would, because there's so many of these story scenes that you have to have, because they're very actively chosen not to have flashbacks. Like that Littlefinger thing, we could have seen that scene between the Hound and the Mountain, and then that arguably would have been more moving and give you more sympathy for the Hound, which you do kind of need going forward.
I guess, I don't know, I never found it hard to have sympathy from the Hound, to be honest. Like, the Hound isn't really a character yet in it, it's just his first appearance, isn't it?
I mean more in the sense that just getting told about it makes it more abstract than seeing it.
I always thought that they were trying to distance people from their pasts and trying to get you to judge them on their actions a bit more. I don't know. It'd be a very different show with flashbacks.
Well, they do start to use them later, which is why I asked the question.
Well, yeah, but that's because, well, Bran becomes a wizard.
Yeah.
There's not so much flashback. Is he not literally time traveling?
Yes.
Yeah. I don't think does it count as a flashback if it's time travel?
I suppose it does from a narrative constructive sense.
I guess you're probably right. I don't know. Especially in the earlier episodes, I quite like them not using flashbacks. It does occasionally require a bit of a dull info dump, but when the info dumps are good, they're really good. Okay. So I don't really mind it. Don't get me wrong, I think they're mismanaged at a lot of points, especially in the sort of Daenerys' arc. A lot of the info dumps are mismanaged very, very badly.
Well, I would say like one scene that doesn't fall into that trap is the scene between Ned and Gendry in this episode.
Yeah.
Because there's explicitly something going on between the two characters in that scene where you can tell that Ned has a theory.
Yeah.
And that it's getting confirmed through the questions that he's asking, which makes all the answers relevant. And like, I even like it at the end of the episode where Kat's just going, "Who are you? Who are you? Who are you?" Because that's all building to, oh, Tyrion's in trouble here.
Yeah. No, that's quite good. Also, the beginning of them moving around I really like. Tyrion working out he's been framed as well is quite nice. In fact, all of the murder mystery stuff in this episode is one of the reasons I like this episode. Is the things it starts to put in place with, who killed Jon Arryn. I quite like that they really majorly put that into play there. The sudden assassination of somebody by an accident in a jousting tournament. Tyrion working out that his dagger's been used to frame him. Them kind of putting into place the layer of intrigue that they're going to start digging into in the next couple of episodes. I think is quite a good thing they've managed to do in this one.
Well, I agree to an extent. I do have one question. Is that plot slightly undermined by the fact that we know that Jaime and Cersei were involved because they have a conversation about being involved right in episode 1, scene 2? Watching someone figuring out something you already know, is that interesting? Like, from the irony of it?
I do see what you mean. I think it may... I don't know.
I think they would.
They might be, but then...
Because then you're learning with Ned.
I suppose, but then Jaime and Cersei's characters would fall a bit flat for the first couple of seasons.
Well, see, the thing is, one of these is a problem they've inherited from the books, because Jaime and Cersei were never point of view characters, so that's why the narrative is designed this way. Should they maybe have just respected that and kept Cersei and Jaime's motivations in the shadows a bit to start with?
I think maybe, actually. I will give you that point. I'd say its saving grace, though, is that although you know they were involved, and although you know like why this happened, the exact process is what I always considered they'd be finding out. Arryn, like, we know what Jon Arryn knew, but we don't know how Jon Arryn ended up finding out, why he ended up starting to suspect, and how many people are involved in this plot. Like, it reveals that the Mountain is somehow involved, but it doesn't tell you why the Mountain's involved or what the Mountain's motivation for being involved is. So although the key perpetrators have been revealed, there's a huge number of people in King's Landing in the political intrigue side of things that you don't really know why they're doing anything like this. And for working out mysteries still, we've still got Littlefinger, whose motivation is completely in the dark. Varys' motivation is yet to be revealed. But I suppose I do see what you mean, that it might have been a bit more interesting to not know Jaime and Cersei's quite so early on.
Yeah, just so, like, that way when Ned's finding out these things, we're not watching that scene going, oh, this is where he finds out this. Like, it's almost self-spoiling.
I do kind of see what you mean.
But I would tell you, like, one thing that I actually enjoyed more than the detective arc, even though that's the main arc of the series at the moment, everything at the wall.
Everything at the wall.
It's really simple. It's just, Jon encounters this guy who's not that great at things and protects him. That's his story for this episode, and it's great.
It is good. In fact, this is the one episode where I like the wall. I usually find the wall intensely dull.
It's like, even right at the end of that arc, Thorne gets to have a really important speech where he's like, no, seriously, you're all going to die when winter comes. That's why I'm doing these things. And that's a legit thing for him to say. And it really sets up his motivation well for the rest of the series.
No, totally. That's actually why I like the training scene where they set 3 people on Sam. And Jon's like, that's unfair. And as far as I remember, the instructor's like, yeah, but if he doesn't learn to do this, he'll just get brutalized.
Yes.
this is why we are doing this. I'm not doing this to bully someone. I'm doing this to train them to be able to fight.
Whereas John's coming from the point of view, we should all protect each other.
Yeah.
So that's a clash of viewpoints where both viewpoints are valid. It's very interesting
Yeah, they
watching
both
it play
make sense.
out. Like, I like the scene where John takes Ghost and basically goes, right, don't touch him.
Yeah.
Because otherwise it makes no sense why they would. I would say that's the one part of this episode that really stood out to me. Is like, that really holds well together. Because
The scenes on the wall.
every single scene, and there's like 4 or 5 of them, which you don't get nowadays in one episode,
Yeah, that's true.
built to this conclusion of John and Thorne being like completely at loggerheads, and that's something that is still going like by the beginning of season 6.
Well, it's an important character interaction, those two, and it sets it up really well. That's what it's...
Which is why I would say that differs like from, as I started this, the scene with Viserys and Dariah, because Viserys is going to be dead in 2 episodes. Dariah is not going to be an important character. So you can see where, when they know where the story is going, the scenes are much better written.
Yeah, no, I
So
do agree.
Arguably, some of the faults could fall with George R. R. Martin not giving them enough information to work with at the start.
I think that's possibly true. Probably just could have done with a decent editor.
Yeah.
Like, I like 75% of the episode. Don't really like any of the stuff with the Dothraki, personally, at that point, just because, well, they don't really do anything. Yeah, Daenerys hits Viserys at one point.
Yeah.
We've already seen that sibling fight happen.
Yeah.
It didn't need to happen again.
Nothing has progressed from the previous episode.
Yeah.
Because Dany already asserted herself over Viserys in the previous episode. And you even get, like, the first scene in this episode, Jorah's telling Dany that Ned Stark was the one that had a beef with him. We know that, because you addressed that in the previous episode. And the episode before that. There's no need to repeat all this information time and time again.
Yeah, that's true.
That's probably why people don't enjoy the Dothraki stuff to start with.
Yeah, I think that's probably true as well. I don't know, I've got my problems with the Dothraki in general, but...
So, I mean, in conclusion, I would say this stuff is better than the first 2 episodes. But I wouldn't say it reaches the peak that we've had so far of the 3rd episode.
See, I more or less agree. I think it's got a couple of moments in it that are better than most of any moment in episode 3. But on an average, I think it's slightly less good than episode 3. However, there's, like, you know, the stuff on the wall, the mountain killing someone. There's a few moments in it where it's the kind of point of Game of Thrones where I think, okay, things are now starting to heat up. So yeah, for conclusion for me, I think about 75% of the episode is good, 5% of it's great, 20% of it probably didn't need to be there.
Cool. Well, we'll be back next week.
Cool.